Gambling is a big part of Australian culture. Australians lose more money per person gambling than people in any other country. And the rise of smartphones also means that for the average Australian, it's now easier to gamble than ever before. But just like social media is very different from catching up with a friend in person, online gambling can be a very different experience from gambling in the physical world. This is especially the case for sports betting. Research has shown that modern sports betting apps nudge people towards a kind of continuous, immersive gambling that leads them to experience more gambling-related harm overall. What this means is that we need to understand how gambling app design shapes people's gambling behaviour, and how we can support stronger regulation that stamps out some of the most harmful aspects of the gambling industry. If you placed a bet on a horse race 50 years ago, your gambling environment would have looked something like this. You would wait in line to bet with a bookmaker, check the odds on the blackboard, and physically hand over your cash to place a bet. If you won, you would line up again to collect your winnings. The whole process would have taken 10 to 15 minutes at a minimum, and you had to be physically present at the racetrack on the day to take part. By contrast, if you want to gamble on sports or races in the present day, you're much more likely to be looking at something like this. Here, there is a huge array of things you can bet on. There are live notifications about promotions, and in some apps, there is even a built-in social media platform. You can place bets on a wide range of different live events from anywhere that you have access to the internet, and at its fastest, the whole thing can be over in a matter of seconds. It may seem obvious when you look at those pictures, but the ways in which people bet on sports in person versus online are not the same. So how are they different? And why is online sports betting thought to be more harmful? The research suggests that it's because sports betting apps transform betting into a continuous and immersive activity. That means that it has no natural breaks, making it easy to stay constantly engaged with the betting app. This is kind of like doom scrolling, except that you're losing money as well as losing time. There are many app features that have this effect, but research suggests that two features might be particularly harmful. First, in-play betting, like betting on who will score the next bucket in a basketball game. These bets are made quickly and resolved quickly, speeding up the pace of gambling overall. Second, the other feature is called instant cash out, which allows people to take an early payout from one bet and potentially to immediately restake that payout on a different bet. Together, what these features do is they remove the natural friction of sports betting in the physical world, where there is more time for people to stop and to reflect on what they're doing. Without that friction, it's easier for people to become enmeshed in an app environment that is trying to part them from their money. So, what can we do about this? As individuals, we can be aware of what kinds of behaviours are more linked with harm. Whenever a person loses track of time while they're using a gambling app, starts betting on in-play events, or uses the proceeds of one bet to immediately place another, they are engaging in patterns of gambling that place them at greater risk of harm. But framing it in that way makes it seem like it's just an issue of individual self-control, which puts all of the onus on the individual and none of the onus on the bookmakers themselves. It's important to remember here that sports betting is a business. It's operated by large corporate bookmakers, and in theory, the way it should work when a corporation causes harm through its business practices is that a country can pass laws and make regulations that prevent that harm. Now, there are two problems with this in Australia. Problem number one, the relevant national legislation for sports betting apps is the Interactive Gambling Act 2001. Yes, 2001, meaning that the legislation that governs betting on an app on your iPhone belongs to an era when people were using dial-up modems to connect to MSN Messenger, and when the most engaging app on their phone was probably the Snake game on a Nokia 3310. Updating the legislation to reflect what sports betting actually looks like in the present day would be one way to tackle the harm that gambling apps can cause. Problem number two, in Australia, sports betting is currently regulated at the state level, meaning that most bookmakers have just moved their corporate headquarters to whatever state or territory has the laxest regulation. In Australia, that is the Northern Territory, where the NT Racing and Wagering Commission is the de facto national gambling regulator because almost all of the bookmakers have been incorporated in the NT. Now, an investigative report by the ABC's Four Corners program recently found that this NT regulator had no full-time staff, has commissioners who themselves own racehorses, and until recently had not published an annual report since 1993. So, one important way that we could address gambling harm would be to regulate online gambling properly. That's easier said than done, but one good way to get started would be to have a single national gambling regulator that is well-resourced and that is empowered to go after the business practices that are causing harm to people. Now, the federal government has actually recently ignored a recommendation to do just this that was made by a parliamentary committee chaired by one of its own MPs. So, next time a political candidate asks for your vote, you can consider asking them what they're doing to regulate online betting, because doing nothing and maintaining the status quo seems like it's a bet that is not going to pay off.